All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We're going to get started here. Welcome to the July 11th, 2022 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. And first up is hopefully something fun today. Our destination marketing organization is presenting their first quarterly report. So please welcome Tori and Doug.
Hello.
Hi there.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's very exciting for us to be before you this morning, bringing you the strategic plan for Josephine County Visitors Association, executed by Travel Grants Pass, which will be Tori. And as many of you are aware, we brought Civic Possible into town and had Jason Schneider help us out with what we are now pursuing as our strategic plan. And you'll have the packet in front of you. And who's running that back there? Perfect. So for the agenda, I'm going to kind of warm you up a little bit with how we got here. Then Tori will come up and she will present the final strategic plan, the 2021 business and marketing plan, and the 2022 business plan updates. So as we brought Civic Possible into Grants Pass, he spent at least 30 days here interviewing many people of the community. Many of you had the opportunity to talk with him. Some of the feedback he got were 14 surveys, 29 meetings, and in that he had 50 hours and 40 minutes of volunteer time and about $2,500 worth of volunteer effort there. The top feedback that we got: success means convene, thank you, convene, collaborate, and partner, data, marketing plan with ROI, and whole county promotion. Challenges faced, and this all came from interviews throughout the public. Some of you, some of us, business owners throughout the county and the city. City micromanaging the process, county-city relations, proving JCVA value, and we've never done it that way before mentality. These are all of the challenges that we are tasked with overcoming. And the strategic priorities. So the JCVA strategic plan and mission is as such: establish trust in the community by promoting our unique tourism assets while enhancing local livability. And the strategic objectives: marketing, data, and partnerships. Those are the three areas that were identified that we need to do the most work in, and that's where we'll kind of center all of our efforts moving forward. And with that, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I will give you Tori, but first I'd like to acknowledge our executive committee who also showed up today to give us support in presenting to you. So thank you very much. And with that, I give you Tori Middlestad.
Thanks, Doug. And I'd like to point out, too, that Objective 4 is kind of an underlying objective of we're a new organization. We have a foundation to build. We should be building an organization that can exist on its own 2 feet, and really operating. And so that's kind of like an underlying objective that goes behind the scenes of our marketing and our kind of traditional work as a DMO. So the cadence of our updates and our meetings and our fiscal year are all a little off because I started in November. I presented a 21 plan while we were in that current fiscal year, and we're in the fiscal year changeover. So I'm kind of trying to use this presentation to catch up what we did last fiscal year and how we're looking towards the next fiscal year to try and level set with the council. Happy to take questions throughout or at the end. So I'm going to start with what we've done in the last fiscal year. I want to level set with some occupancy data. We actually have a partnership with Travel Southern Oregon where we can see these kind of 3-year wrap-ups. With the two charts, you can see 3-year trends, both of occupancy and average daily rate, or often referred to as ADR. Some of the biggest notes is that by August of 2020, this whole community, Josephine County, had gone back to the 2019 levels, pre-pandemic. 2019 was a banner year for tourism across the state of Oregon. And since then, has almost exclusively exceeded 2019 numbers, which is great news for the community. There was also the raise in the TLT lodging tax, which also brought in some extra collections. Now, for average daily rate, by about October 2020, the daily rate had surpassed 2019, and almost every month since then, the average daily rate has been higher than 2019. So on top of that, we have a higher daily rate, means a higher amount of dollars per percentage that we're collecting. And so it's good news for our community. It's good news for the TLT lodging dollars that get both, some get used in some general ways and some get used specifically for tourism promotion and tourism facilities. I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but what this is really showing, and I know it's kind of small, is how the Southern Oregon region, different counties are kind of working together through monthly occupancy. Josephine County is in purple, Jackson red, Klamath green, and Douglas blue. That's 2019 on the left, 2020 in the middle, and 2021 on the right. And so you can see as we have gone through this process that us in Jackson County have really kind of stayed above some of the other counties in the region, and we hope to kind of continue to stay there and grow. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry, it's not clicking. There we go. So moving into some of our successes, I'll start with our social media. This is organic social media, so these are the regular posts that you see, not paid promotion. We took over the social media contract in January, and at that time we increased the contract size so that there would be more posting, more consistency in posting, monthly meetings with our contractor on strategy, creation of blogs that can help drive to the DMO website. And so you can see from January just the rise in engagements on both our Instagram and Facebook channels. And also, I will note from April to June, we did have a paid promotion that was an audience growth promotion. And with that audience growth, we also saw some increased engagement, which is good because that means you're finding the right audience. I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of like the top posts and how they're performing. So starting in January on the left through June, it's the best monthly post for each month. Our sunsets do well, anything Rogue River related. It's a burl, that one really took off. Okay. And then some of the Instagram examples, same thing, January on the left through June on the right as far as top posts. Our outdoors do well, our lively community in downtown, food, all the things that make it unique here. In March, our top post was about promoting finding a local outfitter to help you have your Rogue River experience safely and to take care of our outdoors. So as we move into paid promotion on social media, we had April through June, we really were working on a targeted audience building campaign. We focused on drive markets as well as direct flight markets into Medford. We used storytelling that showed the breadth of experiences. One of the videos was kind of a highlight reel of the area, while the other one was 7 very specific things to do in the Grants Pass region. In that time, we nearly doubled our Facebook and Instagram followers. We had over 10,000 new Facebook followers and 3,500 Instagram followers. And again, I just want to reiterate that it's an A and B testing. It's about finding the right niche audiences based on drive market, the things that they're interested in, families looking to travel, so that not only we are increasing our followers, but they're still, after they follow us, they're engaging in our channels and being interested in what we're posting. And so that's been some real positive drive in our social media. So these are the content examples around the paid promotion. This one is specifically the audience building campaign. On Instagram, it was a swipe up and it would go to our channel. Instagram does not have the same paid promotion for a like Facebook does. So it's actually, you swipe up and it goes to our channel, and then people have to be interested enough to hit like. That's not a direct call to action, and we still got that increase in followers. Versus Facebook can have a direct call to action of like, here's a cool video, hit this button and you'll like our channel and you'll see more. And so Facebook's a little more direct in that process. Also on top of that, the videos brought about 2 million unique impressions. I'm a stronger proponent for engagements as that's an actual interaction between someone and our channel. However, impressions is the first start. You start to see it in your feed and it might catch your eye once, it might catch it again, and then maybe that third time you'll be in actual engagement. So impressions also shouldn't just be thrown out the window. Other paid promotion that we did has really been in support of our community and local events from Boatnik, Back to the 50s, that's coming up soon. The First Friday Stroll, and then June had a whole slate of events from Lavender and our Porch Fest event. And so these are other forms of promotion that we're doing that are more about what to do while you're here, inspiring people to book a trip. And while the other form of event support that we've been working on is ensuring that our photo and video crews are making it to these events, capturing new media, and we can share these media pieces with the event coordinators, promoters, event owners, so that they have high quality media for their future promotion as well. Marketing investments. So for our kind of like printed traditional media, we kind of wanted an evergreen, always on, make sure not to miss an audience while we kind of get our feet under us. We still are covering the Medford Airport advertisement, which is at the baggage claim. Travel Southern Oregon's guide has a 75,000 guide distribution. It's also viewable 24/7 online. And of course, Travel Oregon's guide, which is the biggest distribution in the state at 300,000, and again, also viewable 24/7 online and produced in several different languages. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were still seen in these channels. I'm gonna talk a little bit later about our marketing plan and the visitor lifecycle management of how visitors buy travel. And so these are kind of in that inspire, it might encourage someone to plan, and it's a little bit of just evergreen, it's always there so we're not forgotten. And then for our shoulder and off season, we'll really be switching into a call to action to book and come visit here for really trying to bolster that room where we have the most room to grow in our occupancy. This slide's kind of dense. Public relations, we've already had 4 FAMs come through the region. A FAM is a familiarization tour where you host media. Media who come need to have a sold story, which means the story will be placed and they're encouraged to talk about any of the businesses that they frequent, and as well as their lodging experiences. So Matt Waszczydowski is with the Moon Guidebooks, and he's working on the Hiking in Oregon guide. He was doing Southern Oregon research, also experienced many other things to do here, and also promised to write some content to live on our website as well. In partnership with Travel Southern Oregon, we had VIA come through. We also had a trade group. The Condor flight was turning back onto Portland, and so there was a big promotion to have tour operators based from Germany come through the state. They stayed at the Riverside Lodge and got to do the Hellgate experience. And then Rogue Valley Ventures also had Bree Stock, who's working on a Pacific Northwest wine guide. It's tailored a lot to high-end wine drinkers, but it's also about how to plan and have a great wine country trip. And in Grants Pass, she experienced Vine, Twisted Cork, Lodge at Riverside, among a few other things. And they, of course, have downtime to walk around, see downtown, the bears, things like that while they're here. Looking ahead to public relations, our public relations firm is having conversations with a variety of media, including the ones you see here on this screen. Kid Tripster is likely to come more of this later summer, early fall. We're working on trying to get publications like New York Times and the Washington Post in the area. These sold stories are a great way to meet a new audience, or maybe confirm with an audience who's heard about us before and see the legitimacy of a publication like these and encourage them to book a trip. Photo and video content. This was a big gap in what we had available to us when I started. High quality photo and video assets are, I mean, it's hard to put a dollar figure to how important they are to what they do for a DMO. It's about seeing and being inspired, and that will encourage you to engage. We contracted with a local company, Novum Visuals, and they are working year-round to bolster visual content, so we have the photo and video assets to bolster promotion year-round. So far, April to June, they've had 135 production hours. They've produced over 1 terabyte of captured video footage for us, 500 images, and they've worked on 60 different reels and video projects for us. So we have a lot going with them. We are continuing with them with the new fiscal year, and we have a kickoff meeting for what this fiscal year content and projects look like tomorrow. Moving into the website. Over this spring, since about January, we've been seeing a lot more page views and unique visitors. The chart on the right shows the referrals from social media specifically, and part of this was about increasing blog content creation, pushing that out on our social channel, encouraging people to read more and get back to the website. This overall is our fiscal year results for our website from clicks and impressions, our top 3 visited pages, the search terms that people are using to get to our website, who the audience is, and even what sort of device they're looking at. Since we are in this foundational year and I don't have historical data, I can't compare year over year, but that's what we're working on right now, is building a reporting mechanism that by this time next year, we can compare how we've done this year to next year. So that's where we're at on kind of starting to collect our data, which was also identified in our strategic plan as a very important piece to proving our success here. Another form of data we invested in was called Datify. Some people might think it's Big Brother, but it is tracking cell phones. If your location services are off, you are not being tracked. But what it does do is it allows us to see how visitors are moving through this county. Now, this screenshot is just the high-level dashboard, so you can see the types of information I have available. I haven't filtered looking for any sort of specific information at the moment. You can see about 1/3 of our traffic's coming from Oregon specifically, 1/3 from California, 14% from Washington, and then a mixture of other states. It looks like our midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, has some room to improve as far as overnights. And so what we're really excited about, and part of our strategic plan, is to figure out how to pull quarterly reports from here, make them digestible and understandable to us, our partners, the visitor industry, and help share this information so our businesses can also be taking advantage of this data and maybe reaching new audience. So that is still upcoming on how we make this digestible for those who maybe aren't a total data nerd. But you can get lost in this program, I can tell you that. So that's where we've been. Moving into this new fiscal year, 22-23. One of the biggest things that will be upcoming is we are working on a rebrand. Now, it's not going to be a full 180, leave everything behind, but we are looking for our own branded logo identity. So it's obvious that we're the ones doing these programs. So it'll be a new logo, new tagline, and we'll be transitioning over to Visit Grants Pass. The choice to transfer over to Visit is a search engine optimization trick. When people are Googling and looking to go travel somewhere, they often say visit or visiting an area. And so this will help bolster and get our page up higher. Now, again, we aren't just leaving everything behind. What we are choosing to do is make a brand that's our own identity, but should complement the city's current identity. We've decided to keep the same color palette and font. So when our logos are together, they will complement each other and not fight, but also look like there's some shared pieces to them. So I don't have the new brand to show you yet because I haven't been able to show my full board either, but next update, I'm sure you all will get to see it. So continuing with the rebrand, this slide's really dense. I'm not going to read everything. You're not expected to read everything. But our marketing company did a listening session with our board of directors, which was really about what is the identity of the community you feel, what do you think is important for visitors, and what makes us unique. One of the things that makes us truly unique is that hometown feel. You know, we should be the hometown you come to Southern Oregon for. Our brand pillars of outdoor adventure, scenic bounty, the lively community full of events in a bustling downtown, and of course that hometown feel of that friendly person who asks you, hi, how's it going? Are you from here? No matter where you are. So we want to make sure that those are incorporated into our brand. And so this is our sort of overarching, this is what we're using to build the brand voice, how we interpret this new brand and get it, make sure that our authentic self is shown to the potential visitors. With that, we'll do a website update. Includes changing the URL, the colors, the logo swap. That ice cream looks really good, huh? I hope you're all hungry. The biggest thing that will happen is we're working on an Otis integration. Otis is the Oregon Tourism Information System. database. This is the database where Travel Oregon's business listings enter their website, and if we are integrated with them, I only have one place to update a business listing. When I update it there, it'll show up updated on Travel Oregon's website. Travel Southern Oregon is going to be using this program for their website, and if we do it too, it'll make 3 websites be up to date with only one database entry from myself or hopefully the new staff member that we'll be hiring this fiscal year. So really trying to figure out ways of efficiency and making sure that we are, not only our channel, but our partner tourism channels have the representation from Grants Pass and Josephine County. All right, so moving into marketing plan development. This is that visitor life cycle that I was talking about for buying travel. We've been kind of operating in this inspire phase, making sure people don't forget about Grants Pass. A visitor will, once they're inspired, move into plan. Hopefully they find what they're looking for in planning, they'll book. They'll take their trip, they'll share their trip, either online or when they get home to their friends and family, and then they'll start the new process of the next place they're going. So our campaign that we'll be working on for, again, the shoulder and off season is really gonna be in that call to action to book and take your trip now. So that is what we're working towards. One of the things that will be helping identify the audience of this plan is now that we have Datify up and going, our marketing agency will be looking at who came here pre-COVID, during COVID, who's coming here now. If you call this post-COVID, I don't know what to call it right now. And then also look at the seasonality of who's visiting, because honestly in COVID, seasonality was less important. Families were not tied to a school calendar year. They didn't have to be home when kids could, as long as they had internet, could remote log in and then use their day to explore somewhere new and have a change of scenery. So as we get back to some of these more traditional norms, we'll be adjusting and figuring out how we reach those audiences and who's the right person to reach to for the right time of year. And so lastly, what I really wanted to update and be transparent about is our budget. Because we did not have a full fiscal year and some programs didn't happen or got delayed because we didn't have the capacity to start them, we have some rollover. The increase in the percentage brought extra collections. The higher than expected projections brought more collections. And we're really looking at an operating budget of $1.3 million for this fiscal year, which is unheard of for this community and very exciting. I'm very excited to implement a program like this. Global marketing includes our digital and traditional media, our visitor guide that we'll be working on for the 2023 season, other printed materials, been working with James and the Welcome Center staff of things that people request that they don't have that would be helpful for them to talk about the area. You know, it includes our marketing, PR, social media contractor, the money it takes to promote on social media, and all of that programming. Global sales is more on the trade side. It's about being a part of the Oregon delegation that travels to some of these shows, specifically the Go West Summit, which has historically been one of the most fruitful shows. It's Western-based travel focused, and it really gets you in front of an international audience. Strategic partnerships is associations and conferences for continued education, keeping the visitor industry and some of that support and information from our Oregon Destination Association, our chamber memberships, and all of those things that we can help our industry with. Admin, of course, is salaries, the normal cost of doing business, and hopefully including an additional salary of another full-time staff member. The other includes the 3-month contracted reserve that's in our contract for operating cost. It also has a slush fund or contingency fund, so if programs come up throughout the year, we actually have some flexible spending since so much of it is very specifically targeted and tactically budgeted. It also includes a $100,000 crisis fund that we'd like to put in a high yield account, knowing that inflation is high, gas prices are rising, and there's talk of a recession. And what COVID taught many DMOs is not having a crisis account meant so many of them contracted, lost staff, and are in the same rebuilding phase of, not unlike us, just having a new DMO. And so that crisis account would just sit there in a very, hopefully not anytime soon, sort of real impact on TLT, and then our board is working on what's the policy of if interest earned hits a certain amount, we pull that and add it back into the programming. So that's sort of where we're at with our budget, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Tori. It was fun. Any questions?
Me. Always me.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Tori. It was a wonderful job, and it is amazing to see everything that you've been able to gather and the focus on the data collection so that we can have a place to grow from here, because that is something that we were definitely missing. So, and the quality of the photographs and things is pretty amazing. So a good job. My question is I do know one of the things that I'm seeing happening is a lot of Airbnbs in our community. And I don't know, I mean, I've talked a little bit with our finance director in terms of what type of tracking there is on those sorts of things, and his was kind of like there's really not a lot of it, but this is a statewide issue. So I was wondering whether you have some ideas of how it's being tracked?
You're not the only community facing this. Airbnb and Uber and those share apps are the type of apps that progress faster than laws can progress to keep up. When I was talking with colleagues at Travel Medford, they actually had to change their city code and definition to actually force Airbnb to start collecting their local tax. And so there's that possibility. Otherwise, you start going into, do you have a registration for Airbnbs? Even if you log into the Airbnb app, unless you book it, you don't know what the address is. Or, you know, then that also requires like a compliance staff, you know. So there's several different routes you can take. I'm happy to be a part of the conversation no matter how that might go. And I think, JC, I saw you grab the mic because I'm not on the ins and outs of all forms of tax collection, but I do know that it's a discussion at every governor's conference, every time DMOs come together, because it is a missed opportunity. Travel Oregon was able to make sure and ensure they're collecting the statewide percentage, but it was up to local jurisdictions to get their own.
Okay. So you're saying that Medford did actually change the way that their ordinance was in order for that to be able to happen?
Yeah, they had to change one of the definitions so that Airbnb would be considered in that code to collect that. And I don't know the exact specifics, but I could find out more if it was needed, or if JC, if you needed that help.
Okay.
Yeah, I can work with the City of Medford and figure out exactly what they changed, and we can potentially go down that path.
Okay. Yeah, I know several of them in my own neighborhood, and way I'm sad because that means we have a housing crisis, and yet we're seeing these houses being turned into Airbnbs. But I also know, you know, that in a sense we're getting cheated again if we're not getting the TLT tax for that. So, thank you.
Other questions, Rob?
Yeah, great job today, Tori, and the board also. Thank you. You know, when I and I guess the council too voted to move this forward, I think this is what we had hoped for. The last contractor was literally 10 years behind on his ability to execute analytics and have some kind of view as to where we need to go based on what we've done in the recent past. And that's exactly what you seem to be focusing on, which is great, because otherwise you can't go anywhere. I had just a brief questions. We can go on the strength weaknesses analysis, SWOT. On the weaknesses list, I see things that I think are more probably of a misunderstanding rather than I don't believe they're an actual weakness. And I'm just wondering which of those weaknesses are you actually focusing on or think need work? You familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't have it memorized yet, and I don't have one in front of me. Can you pick one specifically you think is maybe a misunderstanding?
Well, it's funny because some of them as weaknesses could also be called strengths. The fact that it's a new board, the fact that there's a new director, et cetera, you know, well, you get a fresh look at it. So that's a weakness, but it's also a strength. But there was one here where it talked about city micromanagement. And I don't know if you actually feel that that's, I can understand why the people who were interviewed would think that, but the way we set this up was intentionally to take the ability for the city to micromanagement out of it.
Yeah,
so it just seems like that's a misunderstanding.
Yeah, and I think that's more of past experience coming out in those interviews. I have not felt that, and I think the whole going through that DMO pros and going through this process and having a 501c6 that I answer to a board and not directly to council like the last DMO is exactly that, setting up these parameters so that that can't happen again. What we wanted to do was make sure that the people who spoke up and said those things felt heard and that it made it to the plan. It doesn't mean that some of these things aren't already being crossed off. I think SWATs are hard for me personally because anything that's a weakness can be an opportunity if you're a glass half full kind of person. And so, I mean, a SWAT, you can move anything depending on how you think about it. But I would say that's more of a reflection of the past. It hasn't been my experience as I've been sitting here since November.
That's really good to hear, because that's exactly the way that I looked at it, and I know that that's the way council intended to set it up, was to get us out of the way, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad to hear that that's been your experience.
Yeah, thanks. Did you have more than one question? I thought you...
That's enough, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rick?
Thank you, Tori, for the presentation. I do have some questions on the website traffic. When I talked with Jason Ridgely, I didn't know if you did some comparison with other cities and so forth, but how do we fare compared to, let's say, Ashland or to Bend? Do you know if, in other words, the conversation I had before, if everybody's up 30%, then, and we're up 30%, then we're really not showing any difference. So in your observations, were you able to see where we're able to beat the trend in Oregon?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure about competitive sets. That's one of the things I have my marketing company working on as far as like what is the full reporting dashboard that we're collecting. At this point, I don't have data for how their website is going versus ours. It's a little easier with an extra tool we have on social media. I can make competitive sets, at least on social accounts of similar areas. And so we can build those out, and that's a little easier to see. And it's also hard because Oregon was not this flat, everyone felt COVID. You guys were like running in COVID. The I-5 corridor, Eugene to Portland, was very quiet, so it's also how we bounce back, when you bounce back. So there's parts of Oregon that still have not reached 2019 numbers yet, and so it's also sometimes hard to even compare from that aspect. And so I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer for you, but I could even try and get some more research.
Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Tori. I think you're doing a great job. I think the board's doing a great job. I'm very satisfied. I just had a quick question on the budget slide. Mm-hmm. You said there was a fair amount of carryover from last year, and I understand that. I'm just wondering if you have an approximate number of what that carryover is?
Yeah, so our projected budget was around $650,000, and about $312 specifically carried over from that. I started in November, so there's pretty limited spending until we started to hit January and got contractors and some of that, because November, December was really building the plan and getting ready for the presentation here, so it was mostly just my salary. And so that's what carried over, and then the extra collections was around another 280, I want to say, around there. So, I mean, it was a big, also almost equal to the carryover was just extra collections higher than the projection.
Okay, are you planning on spending the entire carryover in this next fiscal year, or is it going to be something where it's spent over more than 1 year?
Yeah, so we want to put some money away in that crisis fund, whether you want to say it's this fiscal year or last fiscal year, or the extra projection money. If you want it that specific, we can make it that way. We do have some hefty one-time costs as part of the rebrand from the website and a visitor guide and some of that sort of stuff that will be less expensive going forward after this year. So we're kind of using some of that extra money to catch up and then get to that point where it's just updating and renewing every year and not so much the building it from the ground up.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, then Rick?
So also under the weaknesses, on strengths and weaknesses, I'm just wondering if you or the board has any miracle answer yet for the weakness that I've just wondered about for a decade or more. And what it says here is distinct seasonality. So for years, we've had people say, why can't we be more like Bend or Ashland or this or that? Well, the fact is we don't have a snow mountain. And, we've got, our main attraction is warm weather stuff. So I'm just wondering, and we've always talked about how do we increase, the shoulder season activities and so forth, and haven't come up with too much there. because, you know, it's hard to plan outdoor stuff when it rains, potentially. So I'm just wondering if you come up with anything yet that might address the downturn in the winter on tourism?
Yeah, I mean, the little bit of Datafy snooping I've been able to do once the tool was made was we actually have a pretty high amount of returning visitors, whether that's people visiting their families or just coming back because they like it. The people who are returning have likely already done the Rogue River and some of those seasonal experiences. So how do we show them the other experiences maybe they've looked over? Is it the farm harvest and agriculture? Is it the fact that we have wildflowers blooming from about February through June? I mean, the wildflower season is beautiful here. It's green, you don't have to hike in 100 degrees. If there's areas where there's snakes, it's too cold for them to be out on hiking trails. And so there's things like that that I think we can promote. We also are lucky enough to have a year-round mountain biking season with the type of soil we have here, and that's a niche audience that if they can spend $10,000 on a bike, they can travel and book a hotel room. So those are the kinds of people that we can try and look at during the shoulder and off season. And so it is niche, it's specific, it's probably audience like a dual income with no kids who maybe like wine tasting. Storm watching in the wineries during winter is beautiful. I think the vines are just as beautiful whether there's leaves on them or not. So it's about getting people to see that secondary beauty. And there's alternative winter experiences. So thinking beyond just a mountain experience.
So have you found a way to reach people that might be specifically interested in historic downtown? Because that doesn't change much winter to summer in that regard. But have you found a way to address those people?
Yeah, and that's what some of that Datafy information will do, and also build some demographics out. And then, yes, the downtown experience is there year-round. Also, you'll have the holiday season, which I think has been underutilized as a marketing tool, from the community tree downtown and the parade and really great local shops to shop at. And so we had Novum at last year's holiday stuff, capturing stuff. So we actually have some photo and video assets to promote for this holiday season. So we plan on also promoting that. And then in springtime too, yeah, you can get a break from the rain by going in a gallery, a local store, go eat at a restaurant. And so there's things like that too that we can promote.
So I'm just wondering, is there a way to identify or attract people that have showed interest in historic anything? I'm not sure if you can partner with the state, historic society, or people that have looked at those types of issues, and or that they're attracted to that kind of thing. And I'm just wondering if there's a way to partner with other historic downtowns, or like I say, the state association. I'm not sure how you would do it, but I'm sure if anyone could do it, you could do it.
Yeah, and if there's some rumblings about whether or not a Main Street organization starts here to help serve the downtown, and that's a whole nother audience that can be built. That's the kind of marketing and digital marketing that social media is really good for, because people like things on Facebook and that puts them in a category. And so we have niched out, families traveling with kids age 1 to 16. Like, you can get that specific. So it can be a couple who likes to travel, who likes historic downtowns, galleries, public art, those types of things that we have in our downtown that might encourage them to come.
Rick?
I want to thank you in moving forward with some of the directions you're providing, and I think your Visit Grants Pass, I think that has a lot of value to it. The one question I do have, when you start talking about a new logo, what is the process? Do you bring that to us and we review it before you start using it, or how's that work?
So since I'm a separate organization with a board of directors, it would go to the board to approve, and then show you guys our new product. And that's basically the biggest difference between the past organization and our organization, as far as structure. Valerie, as our city liaison, was a part of that listening session of community identity. And so we have a rebrand committee as part of our board, who has been attending the meetings with the marketing agency on the logo and the new tagline.
So when you bring that to your board, does your board or you bring it to the council before it actually becomes public, or how does that work?
So if our board approves it, we should be able to go public even before council were to see it.
Tori, I think there's some confusion about the logo being the the Live Road would still be the city's branding logo,
Yep.
but you're creating a separate
Yeah.
logo for your organization.
So it's actually, so the city itself will not be rebranding. It's very uncommon for a city and DMO to have the exact same brand. And then it gets confusing if there's only a logo somewhere. Did you guys buy it? Did I buy it? Is a city staffer attending this industry meeting, or is it me? And so that's why we want our own identity, but the city's branding itself should not change.
Okay, thank you. That explained.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Any other questions? All right, nice presentation. Quick comment, it's hard to read they're just printed out for.
Oh, yeah, I was trying to save some paper, and there's a digital PDF where they're the full page that I think was distributed, so, but if in the future you need printed ones, full page, I'm happy to provide those.
Okay. No other questions today? Okay, we'll look forward to seeing you again in a few months then.
Thank you for the time today.
All right, next up, Public Safety Services Funding, and JC is going to be our presenter on that one.
I feel like I'm always following the fun topics. Hello, Mayor and Council. We're going to go over some public safety funding again. So subject and summary, I've got some answering the previous questions that you guys had at the previous meeting regarding our urban renewal agency, frozen base, some exempt properties, further utility fee information, and in comparison to the county proposed sales tax. And then the relationship to council goals, enhance community safety, the #1 goal of 2022, permanent funding for public safety services. So in your packet, I also have, because the slides can be very small, so there is a packet of all of these exhibits in a larger format. And so in Exhibit 1, you have the frozen base. And if you could see the column labeled with a number 1, that is the frozen assessed base for the Urban Renewal Agency. Column 2 is the increment assessed value. And then column 5 is the potential dollar amount for the urban renewal, which was billed at $1.4 million. And to go further in the packet, because the detail was the exhibit there, and I'm just trying to summarize it for you on this slide. Sorry about that. And as we move into property tax exemptions, and this is Exhibit 3, it's a little bit bigger. This is the list that was given to us by Josephine County. And you'll see that there's 42 on here, and 33 of these categories have an ORS designation. So there's really not a lot that we could potentially do by making them unexempt. 33. And here is how that data comes out. There's about $330 million worth of exempt property value. And it's not just schools, hospitals. There is residential, like alternative energy in there as well. There's veterans exemptions as well. So when you look at this, it's not necessarily one sector throughout the county or our city. There are other areas potentially too that are exempt. And it's a little misleading in this $330 million. And I did the calculation here of that $330 million potentially being $1.9 million if you look at our levy and our permanent rate. But that's not real because ORS would exempt most of those properties anyway. So even if we could, we would have to basically have ORS be changed to get that 1.9. But just to kind of give you that realization of potentially that's where it's going. Of the top 25, yeah,
So when you say ORS would exempt some of that,
There's
exempted
rules
from
in ORS.
taxes or exempted from potential fees?
it's the property types. They are exempt per ORS.
So, but they're not exempt necessarily for a fee, they're exempt from a tax or a levy?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
So can you, when you say veteran, what specifically does that mean? Is that a home that a veteran owns, or what is that?
Yeah, so there are 6 different categories on Exhibit 3. There's a disabled veteran, DV1 code, and then there's DV2, DV3, and then at the bottom, there's a veteran surviving spouse, and several other codes as well.
Okay, so is that like 100% of their property taxes property taxes are neutralized or negated, or?
I didn't go into detail of how that calculation would work, but I'm guessing it's probably something like the alternative energy, where a portion of your property taxes, not 100%.
And so for alternative energy, how does that work?
I don't know, actually. I know that there is, where's the number
I mean,
here?
if someone throws a few solar panels on the roof, do they get their property taxes waived?
I don't know. I don't
Brian?
know if it's waived 100%, but you get a credit, basically, as an exemption. And it goes into the assessed value calculation, measure 50, measure 5.
Thank you.
Where was I? For the top 25, $195 million in property values, which is about 60% of this list. There are 10 childcare, schools, student housing in that top 25. There are 3 charitable, nonprofit, or religious properties. There are 3 city properties. There are 4 county, federal, local, and state properties. There are 3 medical facilities and 2 that are other in classification. So going through the utility fees pros, so pass to those who already use city services and logical assumption that they use public safety, and you can include those exempt properties or those values. Similar staffing and resources already in place for the city, and in case of jurisdiction actually lowering their fee after they initiated it. And the cons, obviously, it's another fee on the utility bill, and that will potentially increase delinquencies. So of the data that we actually do have in our system, there are 4 different types that the city of has to pass. So like the city of Medford, there's an additional unit charge that we have on water, residential water. There's impervious area, which is like our stormwater charges. The previously used jail fee is like transportation. And then the city of Corvallis actually bases it on their water meter size. So some of the AUC pitfalls is we have about 2,700 accounts that don't have water meters, and they are sewer only potentially, and they're off of well. Current AUC data only applies to residential water accounts. Portrayed model gives commercial the same score as a residential meter. So I pulled up the Medford Municipal Code. There is hereby imposed upon reasonable party for each developed parcel in the city a public safety fee for each residential dwelling unit, business unit, or tenant space existing on the parcel. Now the reason why I kind of highlighted that piece is we don't currently do that with commercial. So if it were a strip mall that had 5 businesses within it, we don't charge it that way. It just gets charged on the 1 meter. So we would need to go back through, find those accounts, and figure out how to do that charge if we were going to go through this model. And this goes into Exhibit 5. And here's an approximation of what that would look like, about $566 per unit. And again, you can see that 1-to-1 commercial to factor. And then on the very, very right, potentially getting back to that nexus of service, is that percentage of potentially where the money would be coming from. And this is a calculation of about how to get $1 million out of this charge. And moving
Mayor,
to impervious
can I ask
area pitfalls.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On the additional unit charge, is that like an amount per unit of water, or is that an amount per account?
No, so like think of it like a apartment complex. So if there's 10 rooms at the apartment complex, that'd be a 10 charge. So it's per,
kind of like a flat fee per dwelling?
yes,
Okay.
or business.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And again, these are all estimations. So impervious area pitfalls, so there's an approximation in the calculation of some of these that are parking lots or other property types and not subject to the fee. So we do have some properties out there that are just blank vacant land that we don't have currently charged. So if we were to go down the path of looking at this, we would need to figure out what to do with those pieces. And this is Exhibit 6, and this is what that impervious would look at about $1 million. You could see the number of accounts, and then the total number factor, and then the change of those percentages on the very right.
Going to get clarification on that.
Yeah.
So you're saying that currently, if something is vacant, they're not paying any stormwater fee, is that correct? It's only?
Yeah, so current practice typically is when even a resident moves out, we don't charge it either.
Okay, so that's what you're saying, is that would be, if we changed the current system that we used for stormwater drainage, that would be another way to raise, is
Right.
what you're saying?
But we probably wouldn't want to go down that path of making it different than the way we do the rest of our business.
Okay. Okay.
And transportation, so like the jail fee, there's about 209 accounts that are not subject to the transportation utility charge. There are public parks, schools, county buildings, city buildings, and parking lots. We don't have data for that right now. I believe in the early 2000s study of how they came up with how all of these are charged, there is some codes and transportation rates for those kinds of buildings, but we would need to go back through and figure out what those would be. So currently we wouldn't be charging ourselves. And then Exhibit 7 is approximately that same $1 million and the different kinds of classifications we had for that jail fee.
So is that based on based in a manual when you use the multiple factor? In other words, how do you've come up with $1 million, but how do you come up with the multiplier?
Yeah, so there's, based on the category type of your property, it has a different quantity that it gets multiplied.
Okay.
So a hospital is different than a school, which is different than a residential neighborhood.
And it's my understanding planning has that manual that has those rates in it.
Correct. And me and Brad talked, and we could just probably pull it up and try and figure out what's the reasonable rates of those properties that we don't currently charge those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it's coming quick, so I'm just trying to keep up here. Back on the additional unit charge, I see that the factor from accounts to the total factor is commercial, it's a 1-to-1, multifamily, it's a 4-to-1, and the other ones, it's 1-to-1. And then on the next one, where it's the impervious area, it's a totally different factor, and I'm just trying to understand how that factor works.
It's by square footage for impervious factor. So the fact that different properties are different size, it gets charged a different factor.
Great, thank you.
Before I move on, should I go back to any other questions that people may have? Okay. And then the water meters, obviously, the 2,700 we don't currently have. 125 to 150 of those accounts are outside city limits, and the previous council direction was to not include irrigation-only accounts as well. And I'll slow down and I'll go slower on this one. So you can see the number, the meter size, the number of meters that we have in the system, and then the residential meter equivalent. That is how the city of Corvallis does it, and it's based on an AWWA, American Water Works Association table. That basically, you can see that $53, it's like a 53-to-1 ratio, because they deem that an 8-inch meter is that much more of a draw on the system by about 53 times. And so as you go across there, that $6.28 for your 3/4 inch meter is the baseline, and then everything goes up by that residential meter equivalent factor. And to go one step further beyond this, so this is by the meter size to get that relational back to the other charges. This is how it looks as far as commercial, multifamily, public, and residential. And again, that nexus of service potentially. So the local option levy and service districts obviously works in there. For about $1 million, about 29 cents per thousand right now. Pros, it's been very consistent, voter approved at $1.79 since 2010, and we're currently receiving a little over $6 million for public safety. Cons, obviously it's temporary because you can have a 5-year maximum. They are subject to future property tax compression first, and subject to voter approval, which may be contrary to community's desired level of service. And then that voter approval, desired level of service as far as the stability, because it does come up every 5 years, there is that kind of community and organizational impact of what is it going to be. So that's a con as well. There was a county proposal brought to us where the sales tax where the city would receive about $8 million. The pros would be consumers pay for services, including the outsiders. We don't have necessarily the data that would support knowing the inside versus outside spending. Other jurisdictions have models to leverage from, so the city of Ashland obviously has a sales tax. The cons, obviously Oregonians are typically adverse to sales tax and subject to economic volatility. And I'm going to go through exhibits 9 through 10. And so what we did for the 4 utility fees is we came up with 25 random accounts throughout the city. Obviously we picked some because we wanted to have a grocery store, a medical facility, things that you would know in your community, you would know would be potentially in your ward, what your neighbor might be, what a business might be. And so there's a list of 25 that we actually pulled the real data to show you what that would look like. And so the list is exhibit 9. And as we move to exhibit 10, it's the same 25 accounts at $1 million to make $1 million at those rates. And so you'll see that the monthly AUC charge and things, those are going to tie back to those tables. And it is this big spreadsheet, so I tried to make it as big as possible so we could read through this. So you would see each one of these accounts and monthly what they would potentially be charged, and then annually to the right. Now the annual levy, that is actually their real property taxes, and that is divided by 6, because currently we receive about $6 million for fiscal year 22, which is the November 21 taxing period.
Okay, I'm going to have you go back over that again because it
Yep.
went pretty fast. So I just found it. So say just what you said before, because these are the 25, am I correct? Accounts?
That is the 25,
we
that is
pulled
their
out.
classification within the system.
Okay.
And then it goes through the different factors.
And so this is monthly, the monthly amount that they would be, and that's above what they would do now because they don't have that, correct?
That is correct.
And so, and then the annual levy is what right now they're paying on a month, is that an annual?
Annually, correct.
Annually.
And then divide that by 6 because this is to relate it back down to $1 million.
Okay. And so, okay.
And so I did it, and this will make more sense why Exhibit 11 is this way.
Okay.
Exhibit 11 is the same information at $6 million, which is actually to try and keep it apples to apples.
Okay.
That annual levy amount is their true billed levy amount that account was billed.
Okay. Okay.
And so the relational,
Okay, so you see the levy going down if the other things went up, is what we're basically seeing, is...
I was just
kind
trying to
of-
give you a
Yeah,
comparison side to
yeah,
side, if you
yeah.
wanted to replace it or
Yes.
do it with it.
Perfect, thank you. It was at the end of.
It's in this kind of stack of white papers that are separate from the presentation. Had a paper clip on it.
It's just like, give us time.
Sorry, this is a hard way to give a lot of data and not necessarily confuse everybody at the same time, too.
It's a lot of data. Yeah.
Are there any questions regarding,
Since we have
10s and
people just
11s.
catching up, and now that I think everybody's probably found the paperwork, you want to take a look at Exhibit 10 again and just explain what you just said again?
so the description is the type of account that we pulled out. And then as you go across to the right, the service type is kind of like the classification in which we have it in the system. And then you can see there's the AUC, the impervious, the transportation, and water meter sizes. And then if those, as they go across, what that monthly charge would be for each one of those accounts. And then if you multiply that monthly amount by 12, what that annualized amount would look like for each one of those accounts. And so that Exhibit 10 is just to get to $1 million approximately. And then Exhibit 11, it's the same information, it's just to get to $6 million, which is approximately what everybody is charged as far as local option levy at an annual base. Yes.
Go ahead, Joel.
So if I understand it correctly, on Exhibit 11, you keep the same amount for the public safety, but there's winners and losers about who pays, and Exhibit 11 illustrates that.
Kind of trying to make it apples to apples of what currently is billed as far as those accounts and levy dollars.
So for example, just to make sure I understand it, on a single family residence under the levy for an annual fee, let me get that here. That would be $370 in property taxes. If you went to annual impervious, it would drop down to $221. But that would be offset by, for example, in medical, they would go from $1,000 or $19,000 under an annual levy to $46,000.
Correct.
So the family residents would pay less, and the medical facility one would pay more.
Correct. And that's again why I wanted to highlight some of these too. And you brought up a good point on the medical facility. And as I brought up before, they are exempt in certain regards, but they're not 100% exempt. And so they are paying property taxes.
Rick?
So JC, on Exhibit 11, it shows $6 million, and yet that would be inadequate to really cover the current needs. Is that correct?
Correct. Again, trying to keep that apples to apples in the sense that our local option levy brings in about $6 million, and we know based on the county website that we can pull up each one of these accounts and see what their local option levy was charged, and so we can relate it back and be more one-to-one.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective. That's very informative. Thank you.
I know there's a lot of information, so I can stick here for a little bit if you guys want to read through it.
Is the difference between Exhibit 10 and Exhibit 11 just the 6 factor?
That is correct.
Okay.
Again, feel free to ask me questions if we don't cover it right now. So call to action date, just wanted to give you a reminder of the timeline. There is not necessarily a call to action date. But you'll see that the levy ends in about 23 months now. And so based on how the last meeting ended, we have 2 calls to action. The call to action regarding the county proposal would be to not support the county proposal, or endorse, promote, and partner with Josephine County and Cave Junction, and those levels of involvement. And the second call to action would be to provide staff with direction on which funding options to pursue, either council initiated or required by vote.
DJ?
Yeah, this is just exactly the document that I think we were looking for. Where can I find the information to differentiate between some of these descriptors? Medical facility 1, medical facility 2, for example?
We tried to find it generically, so we weren't pointing a finger as far
Of
as
course.
showing who exactly it was.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do it in a way that they're very similar, but they're not the same.
Okay.
So that's why there's 3 different like specialty retail businesses, because obviously as you go downtown, there's different sizes of businesses
Sure.
and things. And so trying to keep it as generic as possible to not point a finger, but at least give you the realization that different people are going to get charged differently.
Of course, that's sensible. Thank you.
Val?
I just want clarification on the AUC, which is the additional unit charge. That is a unit charge that, in this case, they have in Medford, that is just a fee extra fee for public safety. That's correct.
And it's a flat fee
Okay.
per unit. And so
Okay.
a duplex would get
Okay,
charged
so
double.
that's why I'm seeing on the multifamily 60 and the 26, PUD 26, because that's the number of units. So each unit would be charged separately.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Brian? Question? No? Okay. Anybody else have questions? Okay. Thank you, JC. And discussion. Just want to let it soak in for a bit. Brian, then Joel.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's interesting because going through each of these columns, no matter what option we pick, there's winners and losers. It's not a uniform, there's no silver bullet here. So I was just going through tallying, and each one, there's different ones that go up and different ones that go down, and by different amounts. So I'm going to need some time to kind of analyze this.
Joel?
I second that. There's a tremendous amount of data here, which is to be applauded, and it's very understandable. And to comprehend it in the 15 minutes of the presentation is beyond my capability. So I would need more time to look at it, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and these are rough estimations too. Just wanted to make that clarification. Even as we were going through the 25 individualized things, we found weird quirks in some of these accounts and had to kind of come up with a best way to make it all standardized to where everybody's kind of looking at the same charge, so to speak, because we have certain things that are like 3 water meters on one property. So how did we make it relatable across the board?
Rick?
JC, I also appreciate the information because I think it's very informative to know what our options are as we go forward, like if the sales tax is successful or not successful. I can see this is very valuable for the future. Thank you.
Valerie?
I don't even know how to ask what I'm trying to ask, you know what that means, because there's so much information. But I've just, based upon this, what we're saying is that medical facility does pay for the levy. Is that because some of them are private and some of them are not? I mean, that was my question.
I don't know if I know the exact answer to your question, but yes, they do pay property taxes. Even though there is an exemption, and you can even pull up their property tax bill and you can look at it, there's a large exemption on there, but they still do pay a portion.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting because I didn't think they did, so interesting.
Rob?
But when we say medical facility, that's a really broad category, getting down to what DJ's question was earlier. So medical facility, does that mean a nonprofit like Asante is paying property tax and levy?
So yeah, it could be the hospital, it could be like an urgent care.
Well, I understand it could be, but I'm specifically asking, so this giant operation, they're a nonprofit, are they paying property tax and levy, or are they not, like Asante?
Some of them potentially would be, even the city, if we rent out properties, we have to pay property taxes on those as well. Even though we're exempt, but when we try and make a profit, then that is subject to property taxes.
So I'm specifically, once again, asking, so does Asante, the hospital, Three Rivers Hospital, a big piece of property, are they paying property tax and levy or not?
Yes, they are.
So to the amount that's on this page? Great, thank you.
That's on that page per that account.
Great, thank you.
Joel?
Well, I was just going to mention, you know, we ran a medical facility for 20 years, and we paid property taxes. Of course, we were not a nonprofit, but we paid property taxes, business property taxes all 20 years.
Okay, we obviously have a lot of info to just look over and soak up. Any thoughts on just what you want to do with your next discussion? We've sometimes kicked around having a smaller committee look at this, or bring it back to the full group in another workshop, or DJ?
Yeah, I'd propose at the earliest convenience, given that we have some data. I think we're all kind of unified in that we need to absorb this, you know, and understand the implications of something like this in the community. I think it's pretty simple to look forward. I think 2 weeks should be plenty of time, 3 weeks. I'd like to get that on the agenda, I mean, no later than July 25th, if everybody was amenable to that.
Just to follow up, a follow-up discussion?
Just so we can have another public meeting about our thoughts on the data.
Okay, Aaron?
Yeah, there's two call to actions really for council to consider. The one is what you talked about, ultimately what we would be looking at, what you feel is comfortable to provide revenue for the public safety services. And then also there's the request of the county that is somewhat of a separate issue, but ultimately related also, is what level of support, if any, are you wanting to provide in the process of a county-wide sales tax?
Yeah, and I think we
And that's
have
relatively
something
timely.
coming up on a future agenda for that. It's actually, that part is on the July 20th business meeting. Is for council to have a discussion on your level of support for the sales tax. DJ?
I just wanted to add that there's a forum this Wednesday at 6 o'clock at Anbasker. I think Commissioner Beartrigger will be there for the public to provide input about the revenue for public safety.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm just looking for clarification on, because it says support county proposal. So are we supporting the sales tax, or are we supporting it going on the ballot and the people deciding, so, which is a different thing?
I think that's
the point.
The nature of the conversation on the 20th, yeah, is what your level of support is.
Okay.
Joel?
I also know that the Chamber of Commerce and the Governmental Affairs Committee has yet to look at the subject in depth as well. And it would be nice to have those folks take a look at it before we take a position, I think.
There may not be an opportunity for them to get back to us unless they wanted to provide comment that night. Would be an opportunity. Brian?
Just wanted to respond to Joel. I heard from Josie that their board is going to be discussing it this week. So we should have something before then.
Okay. Well, in that case, we'll just put our follow-up conversation on hold for a couple weeks with the idea that the July 20th we'll talk about the sales tax suggested idea, and then probably the 25th doesn't have anything on it right now, so that's as good a week as ever, I guess, to follow up on this presentation. All right. Next up, Measure 109. Looks like JC's coming back for us. Nope. Augustus, he threw me off. It was a trick. Bait and switch.
Afternoon, Mayor Council. So brought this issue, Measure 109, opt-out with Josephine County. So just a little bit of background. This is relating to the ballot Measure 109, which was the Psilocybin program initiative. The state voted yes on this, so it directed the Oregon Health Authority to license and regulate the manufacturing, transportation, delivery, sale, and purchase of psilocybin products and the provision of those services to individuals 21 and over. So this isn't retail, this is in a controlled setting, microdosing psilocybin. Preliminary rulemaking actually started this year, and the second round of rulemaking is estimated to be completed by the end of this year. The way that the law is drafted is that jurisdictions are automatically opted into this program. And so if you want to opt out of the program, you have to affirmatively send a vote to the people with an ordinance to opt out of this particular program. So Josephine County reached out to us to ask about consenting to their ordinances, which are going to opt out of 1, the production of psilocybin mushrooms, and 2, the establishment of these service centers. And please feel free to ask questions. If one strikes, you don't have to wait until the end. So I've provided both of the ordinances for you, and I've also provided a draft resolution should council decide to consent. But as we'll see, there's going to be a few other options for council to consider as well, all right? So Ordinance 2022-002, the purpose is to prohibit the manufacture of psilocybin products within the county, the cities of Grants Pass and Cave Junction. And again, this is subject to our consent. So these are the 2 prohibition provisions. And this is, again, subject to the voter approval, that the establishment of psilocybin product manufacturers is prohibited in Josephine County, and that the OHA shall not issue licenses to applicants for psilocybin product manufacturing in Josephine County. If these manufacturers were to start anyway, it would be considered a public nuisance and be abated as such. So Ordinance 2022-003 is the prohibition of psilocybin service centers within the county and the cities of Grants Pass and Cave Junction. Same sort of prohibition, no establishment of psilocybin service centers, and the OHA won't issue licenses to applicants for the operation of these service centers. And again, they'd be treated as public and private nuisances and subject to violation. So, Josephine County has asked if the city of Grants Pass is willing to consent to the administration of these ordinances within the city limits. If council were to want to do this, it'd be accomplished via resolution pursuant to ORS 203-040, which would essentially allow a county ordinance to apply inside the city limits. And so this is coming to you now because Josephine County is getting ready to do their first reading of this ordinance on July 27th, so a couple Wednesdays from now. So there are a number of alternatives that council could pursue, including consent. So council could choose to direct staff to start to draft its own ordinances, either prohibiting or allowing production of psilocybin products or the psilocybin treatment centers. Now, it'll be kind of a quick turnaround given that we need to have our ballot language finalized by the end of August. And we'd have to get the ballot language, explanatory statement, all of that stuff ready. And it's still subject to voter approval. So what we would see in that circumstance is you'd have the county with their set of ordinances. If we told them at that point we didn't want to consent and we want to do our own, they'd strike us from their ordinance, and then we'd have our own set of ordinances, either opting in or opting out. Council could choose to consent to one ordinance and not the other. So if council was interested in perhaps having psilocybin treatment centers in the city limits, but not any sort of production, or vice versa, that's a choice that council can make. And so it would have to come with drafting future time, place, and manner regulations, sort of similar to what we have when it comes to marijuana and their placement, marijuana production sites and those sort of placements. And our time, place, and manner regulations would be subject to the final rulemaking by OHA. Another tack, because the rulemaking isn't going to be done by the general election, another alternative is that council could temporarily prohibit the psilocybin treatment centers and production to allow for the rulemaking to complete, and then to make a decision at a later date as to whether they wanted to opt into these programs. And this would still require a referral to the voters because we'd be opting out of the program at its genesis. And finally, council could choose to allow the production of both the psilocybin products and allow psilocybin treatment centers in the city. So we would just not grant consent. Again, the caveat is OHA hasn't finished its proposed rulemaking. They won't do so by the end of, by the November election. So it's possible that municipalities, counties aren't going to really be knowing what they're opting into. It'll have a result on, it'll have a direct impact on what our time, place, and manner regulations might look like. And we would need to receive direction to begin looking into what those time, place, and manner regulations would look like. And that would involve, getting in touch with the cities who are electing to opt in at this point in time. So call to action date is at your discretion. If we consent to the administration of those ordinances in the city limits, we would have to let Josephine County know before their first reading so that they could have time to change their ordinance if we decide not to give consent. And if you choose to consent, I'd like the call to action is to move the resolution truly to a business meeting for approval. And so the alternatives are to modify the resolution, deny the resolution, or look at other alternatives for how we want to handle this issue. And with that, I turn it over to council.
Thank you. Questions? Valerie?
Do you know how, in our county, what the vote was when this was actually voted on?
I do. So Measure 109 failed in Josephine County. 54% voted no, which was 26,065 people. And 46% voted yes, which was 22,474 people.
Okay, thank you for that.
DJ?
So I just have just general clarifications on like what this means. Are we talking about, I understand like it's a therapeutic setting or something like that, so it's not entirely go to the store, buy your mushrooms.
It's not like that at all.
Sure.
Yeah, so the idea behind this is it's like it could either be a clinic setting or it could be like a resort setting. I think what Ashland is doing is they're getting ready to set up so it's like a resort setting. You go to this resort and you receive the treatment at the resort. It's microdosing of psilocybin, so it's a really, really, really small dosage. And it's treated as a resort. You stay there overnight and you receive these services. There are other jurisdictions that are considering whether they want to do it as a clinical setting. So similar to going to a doctor's office, right? You make an appointment, you go there, you receive the treatment, you stay until the treatment wanes off, and then you leave after that.
Sure. And is it fair to presume that Oregon Health Authority or some kind would issue licensure or approval for these therapy buildings?
Yes, so OHA has a specific group that's dedicated to this particular issue.
Sure.
And so they're in the process of finishing their rulemaking. And what will happen though is if jurisdictions don't opt out, they're automatically going to start OHA is going to automatically start processing license applications starting on January 3rd of 2023.
Okay, that was my next question, just for clarity. So the rulemaking should be done 12/31/2022, but theoretical implementation is immediately following the next January?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Rick?
So Augustus, I was stepped out for a minute. Could we go back to the consent slide? So just for my verification or understanding, the county is putting this forward. We can be, in essence, a partner to that vote by giving them the consent to go forward. and we would not have to do anything if that's the direction we wanted to go.
Yes, so essentially the county they've put together the ordinances. They have put the explanatory statement together. They're putting this on the ballot. Again, they have to do their first and second readings, and then it'll only be adopted should the people vote it into effect. So if we were to consent, all we would be saying is, all right, Josephine County, you've made these ordinances. The city grants consent for you to apply these ordinances within our city limits. Because generally the city and the county have different, they're able to make different rules that don't affect each other most of the time.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, then Joel.
So then from a law enforcement perspective, if someone in the city is breaking a county law here, meaning that they're manufacturing psilocybin products, would the city police enforce, or is it the county police that has to enforce?
I believe that the city police would enforce. It's consent to apply the ordinance within the city limits, to be able to use it as city citing the law if they're writing a citation for something like that.
Thank you.
Joel, then Rick.
I had two questions. The first question was, this actually doesn't decide to opt out, it just gives the voters the chance to vote on it. Is that correct?
So if the voters vote to pass these ordinances, then Josephine County, and if the voters vote to pass these ordinances and the city of Grants Pass and the city of Cape Junction give consent to the county to apply those ordinances in the city limits, then there will psilocybin product centers will not be allowed in Josephine County anywhere. And the same thing with psilocybin manufacturing.
So both would require voter approval?
That's correct.
Okay. The second thing is, I'm used to with the three levels of government, the local, the state, and the feds, that the laws of the feds apply to the state and the laws of the state apply to the local. So county laws do not apply within the city of Grants Pass unless we agree to that?
Typically, that's the way it works.
Okay, that's just a little different than the other two tiers of government. Okay, thank you.
Rick.
Augustus, is there a track record with other cities or states that have already put this into effect, and what have been the impacts?
This is Oregon is the first state to be doing this. So there is no track record to look at. What most jurisdictions I've seen so far are kind of comparing it against the implementation of the marijuana program in the state. And they're also kind of looking at the level of enforcement that there was from the OHA when it came to the OMMP program when it was first implemented. And that might be driving some of the decision-making to opt out. Another thing that's driving the decision-making to opt out is the fact that the rulemaking won't be completed until after the November election. This is, again, it's counterbalanced by whatever there's a lot of scholarship and a lot of research about the supposed efficacy of this microdosing when it comes to psilocybin. While I'm not a scientist, all I know is that there's been scholarship that talks about the potential benefits. But largely what's driving jurisdictions to opt out is the uncertainty about the rules and the prior enforcement of the OMMP program when it was first implemented by OHA.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, then Rob.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure I understand our options. So I understand giving consent to the county. If we chose to not give consent and essentially do nothing, it would automatically go into effect in the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we would also potentially have an option of doing a similar vote in just the city jurisdiction to have the city voters decide if they want to have those in the city or not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, then Valerie.
So, I'm not trying to sound too obtuse, but if the city, if we give consent to be part of the county's legislation here, then everyone in the county, I don't know about Cape Junction, but city voters and county voters would then vote on it, correct?
Yes, yes.
So if we decided not to want to ride along with the county, then the city voters would not be voting, would not be part of the county vote, or how would that work?
So if council decided that they didn't want to consent to the two ordinances that the county has proposed, the city could, the council could direct staff to draft its own ordinances.
Right.
And so what would happen is that there would be a county vote on it, and then the ordinances for the county would strike any mention of grants passed consenting. And then they'd do their own vote, and then the city would do its own vote as to whether we wanted to opt out or opt into this program. And then if we were to opt in, we would have to start putting together regulations to put in our muni code to regulate some of these businesses. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so, but, and then, as Brian asked, so if the city does not decide to ride along with the county on this,
Correct. Yeah.
theoretically, the people in the city would not be involved in any vote at all unless we decided to try to come up with our own specific ordinance or opt-out, so to speak.
That's correct. So your lack of consent, if council chooses not to consent, just not do anything, period, then we'd be stricken from the Josephine County's ordinances. And then because we've not consented and we've chosen not to do anything in terms of a voter, we're going to be automatically opted into the program. And so what would be left for us would be to draft time, place, and manner regulations as for the treatment centers and to the production of psilocybin.
And is there a time constraint, meaning that if you said that the statewide rules and regulations on this are not going to be finalized until November? Did I understand that correctly?
December, after the general election.
Okay, so if is there a time constraint on when the city could put something on the ballot? Does it have to be done in 22 or could it be done in 23?
So my understanding of the statute is that if you want to opt out before the implementation of the program on January 3rd, it has to be put on the next statewide ballot, which is the November ballot. And that's kind of also why I mentioned that the city could temporarily stop these, temporarily opt out so they can see what the final rules say and be able to craft rules accordingly. So those are the options, really. You can choose to do nothing and automatically be opted in. You can choose not to consent, do your own ordinances to either opt in or opt out, or you could do your own ordinances to opt out on a temporary basis.
And then when you say temporary basis, that could be changed in 2023.
Yes, but my understanding of the statute is that it would still require a vote of the people.
Right. Thank you.
Valerie, then Kurt.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is indeed in response to 110, because they were both on the ballot at the same time. 110 was the one making the criminal less for the drugs, and then this one, and there's been a lot of feedback from especially rural communities who didn't vote for the 110 to begin with, and having problems with not having any rules set out. So I wanted to ask Warren Hensman what his thoughts were on this Measure 109.
How do I dance around this answer? Okay. So, as your police chief, I would be concerned about an adjacent criminal enterprise moving into town. I think we have enough mind-altering chemicals available to the community that we're struggling to manage, and now we would have another one. That's what I think.
Thank you.
Kurt?
So if they haven't made the rules yet, what's the urgency to put this on this ballot?
Because we're going to automatically be opted in January 3rd of 2023. That's when OHA is going to start issuing licenses.
So if we were opted in, we could push it till the next statewide ballot, is that what you're saying?
So if you decide to opt in, what you would run up against is, say the city were, or say OHA were to issue licenses for individuals within the city. They'd still have to meet planning planning requirements to be able to cite their businesses or their clinics if it's a psilocybin treatment center. And then if you were to, somewhere down the line, decide to put it on the ballot to opt out of the program, then you're still left with those businesses that have been established in the city as non-conforming uses, and they get to continue that use. They'd be vested. So that's kind of the deciding.
You mean they'd be grandfathered in?
Correct. That's what, when I say non-conforming use, that's what I mean, yeah.
One-shot deal.
On the voting statistics, you said that it failed by 54%, Josephine countywide. Do you know what the difference is in the city, how city voters voted?
I don't know. It wasn't broken down that far.
Okay. Other questions, Brian?
Do we know if that data is available as far as what the city vote was? Because I know there's like precinct level results, so.
So when I was looking at it in Josephine County, the certified election results from 2020, I don't remember that it was broken down into who voted for what, depending on whether they were in Cave Junction or Grants Pass. The only results that I think I was able to find were the countywide results. And I did look because I did want it to have it broken down, unless I wasn't able to find it somewhere.
Vanessa?
2 out of 11 city precincts voted yes for this, and where it did fail, it was a very, very close vote.
Joel?
So if I understand correctly, where we're at is we need to put it on the agenda, not at a workshop, but at a council meeting, and then make a decision. Regardless of what our position is today, that's what we need to do. That's my understanding. Is that?
That's fair to say, yeah.
So I would say let's just move ahead and schedule it on the agenda for a decision, and then make a decision. And if there's any more information that's available at that time, that's great.
Any more questions at the moment? Brian?
So the final rulemaking won't be done until December. Are there already draft rules published?
So as far as I'm aware, OHA they started rulemaking April of this year, so there has to be a draft kind of floating out there somewhere. What I can do is I can track that down and get it to council.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to say, I know Vanessa sent some information out, and it did have that information on the current draft rules that they're doing. Sadly enough, I'm not sure that I trust the
those
state.
were the rules that were presented at they did their presentation
Yes.
for LOC and AOC, and so that's the same PowerPoint that they used in what they presented at
Okay.
that. That was a number of weeks ago, maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Kurt?
Well, I don't know much about this topic. I know what I've heard. And I don't think anybody else up here really knows whether we'd be voting on something of value or something of non-value. Is it possible that Asante may have somebody who knows something that could maybe come and educate us a little?
Sure, it's possible we could find somebody who knows more about the topic of the psilocybin itself.
Well, I think I would reach out to them and ask them before we get to that point.
It also may be possible that the recording of the meeting that OHA did for LOC and AOC exists. That might be something that would be useful for council also in kind of deliberating this. I can look into that too.
Okay. That might be good to have some additional resources about the psilocybin. Other questions? Okay. We will schedule that for a meeting.
Likely need to be scheduled probably for the July 20th meeting, as the county's having theirs shortly after that.
Yep.
So we need to provide direction before their meeting.
Right.
All right. In the meantime, if I'm able to get my hands on the recording that OHA did, I'll make sure that I disseminate that to council.
Okay. If are materials like that, or videos or written materials adequate, or do we need to schedule a workshop because I think we only have one opportunity just next week, if you wanted more information on the drug. Brian?
I'm personally okay with not having it at a workshop and just having the information sent to us.
Okay. Kurt, it was your request, so is that okay with you? Okay. All right, thank you. Augustus? Yeah, Rob?
So just one concern that I have that we didn't bring up because it wasn't really in the form of a question, but what concerns me, and it's actually, I find it ironic that the county commissioners would want to essentially prevent people from potentially using these therapies, is because essentially this is an issue between someone and their doctor or someone and their therapist. And to me, the 54% of the people in Josephine County who voted against it would be standing in the way of people actually getting advice from their doctor. And I know there's cancer treatments available in the state of Washington that are not available in Oregon. I know some people from around here have had to travel up there, as ridiculous as that sounds. And I know that, you know, we've heard from the county commissioners many times on the issue of the mandated COVID vaccines or vaccine education, that they didn't want to stand in the way between people's doctor and their patient. And yet here, this is exactly what they are supporting doing. And I really have a problem moving forward with that concept of preventing people from getting advice from their doctor and implementing that advice. And I'm not exactly sure how that becomes part of our next discussion, but to me, that's a really major hurdle that it would be really hard for me to get over, to be preventing someone from getting medical advice and having that medical advice carried out. So and again, you know, Asante was totally fine with, you know, mandating their employees, you know, to get vaccines and circumvent the relationship between them and their individual doctor. So I don't know if they're going to be much help there either. But to me, this is so down a really wrong path, and I'm not really sure who we could get to really speak about that aspect of it, because there are so many veterans across the country who've received enormous benefit. Not just veterans, but cancer patients, people with terminal illnesses, et cetera, who through their doctors have implemented these therapies, and we would be preventing that. And so what's the fallout of that? You know, what negative consequences do we have of preventing people from getting certain treatments? I'm not sure how we can measure that, but it hasn't been talked about today, and it's really a problem for me moving forward.
Well, the purpose of this presentation wasn't to do a deep dive into Measure 109 and all the science, because I'm not an expert in that. The purpose of this presentation was to bring forward to council what the county had requested from us. This wasn't, in my discussions with county council, this wasn't a mandate that the city needed to do this. This was a request. And Cave Junction is also going to be weighing what you guys are weighing, whether it's worth it for Cave Junction to just give blanket consent. And so this is, I understand where you're coming from in terms of the policy-making process. It's just, this is the timing. The timing of it is what it is. And so the purpose of this presentation today was just to present options to council about how to proceed. And if they choose to choose consent, then choose consent. And if there's another, if council wants to go with the other 4 options, that's council's prerogative. And I think that it is worth it to look into the science, spend your time to research the issue, and then we can make this decision at a business meeting, and let the county know as soon as we know what we're going to do.
Joel, then Vanessa.
The other thing is, you know, you look at the role of science in policy making, you can find any scientist to say on all sides of the issue. And so it's going to be hard for there's going to be doctors and scientists that are against it. That's why it hasn't happened so far, and there's going to be others that are going to be for it. So it's the role of science in policy making is somewhat obscure.
Vanessa?
I am glad that you brought that up, Councillor Pell, because there's also a religious component to psilocybin use, so I think it's particularly interesting, government getting in the way of religious practice as well.
DJ, then Kurt.
Yeah, so you mentioned that the Cave Junction Council is primed to talk about this as well. Do you know if they have discussed it or when they intend to? I don't anticipate you'd know when, but...
Probably was going to be today.
Okay.
My discussions with Assistant County Counsel, they made that indication, she made that indication that they're going to be discussing it this week, and I believe it is today.
Sure, I'll be sure to pay attention to what they have to say as well. Thank you.
Kurt?
Well, I would certainly see the chief's concern over production. If you produce it here, it's bound to get out of the controlled environment. But the service centers sound to be a very controlled situation, so it's not going to be a wild free-for-all. So I would consider the prohibition of the production. Let somebody else produce it and bring it here for the service centers. Then we're allowing the therapy, but not the overproduction.
Yeah, I think we'll have several items to consider as you make your decision. Obviously, the medical, pharmaceutical drug aspect of it is one level. How you might want to, whether you want to piggyback on the county or do our own ordinances within the city is kind of another question. How the voters play into it is also needs to be a factor in your discussion. So we will talk about that some more on the 20th.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, please share additional resources on the psilocybin would be helpful. Agenda review. All right. So you have in front of you next week's agenda has interviewing HBSC candidates, hearing about the facility condition assessment report, and coming back up with the council stipend discussion. Any questions about next week before we jump to that business meeting? Brian?
I had a question about the council pay and how kind of the scope of that conversation. I know we've talked about it once, and I don't totally recall what's coming back this time, but I remember last time we were presented with some other communities and what they were doing, and I was kind of hoping we might have more information about that. I feel like there wasn't maybe enough data points for me to fully feel informed, so I was just wondering kind of the scope of what the discussion might be.
The data that we provided and presented was a statewide shout out to cities that had counselor pay or different council benefits and what they did. I don't know if we'd be getting additional cities. There was 86 cities, I think, represented in the information that we provided. So the last time that we discussed this, I think council was having a discussion along the lines of the value of the incentive. But I'd be more than willing to bring back whatever additional information you desire if you have something specific.
Well, I'm just curious, when we were presented last time, were we given every city in Oregon that has council pay, or was there some that were included and some that were not?
There's ones that provided a response to the survey, which I think was 86 cities that responded.
Out of?
204.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
I think we had a pretty good discussion last time. The only thing was there was hesitancy, I think, on the part of anybody to set a dollar amount. And so we just need to set a dollar amount and move forward on the ballot with what we think that should be.
Yeah, Sarah.
Joel, Rob?
Yeah, as I remember, Joel, that's as I remember too, we were going to come back with each one of us talking about a dollar amount. I don't remember us looking at 86 cities or anything close to that, but that might be helpful for some people. We had a list, but it wasn't very long.
Yeah, the list was of the 86 that responded, those that had some kind of something for council was listed on that. So there were some of the 86 that responded. Some of them did not have anything that were similar to what the city provides now.
So basically, each one of us was going to come back with a dollar amount we thought was reasonable, and I guess we were looking at what we feel how much time we put in, how much the time might be worth, and then in addition, how to potentially make this a more attractive position for people that might suffer from some kind of financial loss by being a counselor, whether it's childcare that they have to pay for, or whether it's employment that they've missed. So I guess we were balancing what we think it's worth versus what it might take to incentivize and help other people run. Am I missing anything, or?
I was just going to
Sally?
clarify, we had decided, if I'm correct, to separate it out and just be pay and not have anything else to do with any of the other charter changes. Am I correct? I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have a business meeting coming up next week where we have council action item, an ordinance on the small wireless facilities, a motion just to renew the portable toilet at Riverside Park, a motion to discuss the county's proposed seasonal sales tax and your support level, a resolution to adopt the natural hazard mitigation plan, a resolution to award the Harbeck and Grandview pedestrian safety enhancement project, a motion readopting the investment policy, a resolution authorizing municipal auditor services contract, a resolution approving the transportation and growth management grant, a resolution awarding the fiscal year 23 street overlays project, a resolution awarding the water master services agreement to West Yost, a resolution awarding the water master services agreement to RH2. Are those two different things, or is that an either or? They're just two different agreements, I guess?
They are two different agreements.
Okay. And then appointing committee members to the Committee on Public Arts, the Historic Building and Sites Commission, and the Central Business District Vitalization Task Force. Questions, comments? All right, and then on the July 25th, we'll put the public safety funding follow-up discussion. We also need to add on the 20th the Measure 109 decision. Anything else you want to get on a future agenda, Rob?
So just clarification, I know I asked this before and I'm sorry I forgot the answer. So if the council decided that we wanted to implement some kind of additional fee on the water bill or whatever towards public safety, that could be implemented by council. That could also be put on to a vote of the people. Is that correct?
You have the authority to implement it yourself without a referendum, without a vote of the people,
Right.
but you could also send it to a vote of the people.
And we could also potentially put an advisory question on the ballot along those lines also, a non-binding advisory question.
You can always do something like that.
Thank you.
Joel?
So I just had another subject.
On the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We discussed earlier in this meeting to look into the Airbnbs for collecting tourism lodging tax and what it looks like. And it's not an emergency by any means. We need to coordinate the workload with our staff, but at some point in time, I think we need to have a presentation on that.
I have a note on that. We can maybe do a memo for you if you'd like, or we can do a presentation on it after we gather some additional information.
Well, from my perspective, let's start with a memo and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Vanessa?
In a follow-up to the Swiftwater Rescue memo that we have, I would like to see this topic move to a business meeting. It looks like council direction is required for program establishment.
Counselor, are you interested in having a business meeting discussion on the Swiftwater Rescue Program? Val?
I have a question, because I did read the memo, and it sounded to me like the recommendation would be to work and not have our own, but to work with the county, and I don't know if that's something that can be brought up at the county city meeting as a, and have that discussion first, as opposed to moving forward and just doing something ourselves. Because it seemed to me, and especially with the new fire chief coming on, might be nice to get that perspective and have that input from the county and what they're doing, and if they're not doing it, why they're not doing it, before we jump in and do something separate.
Vanessa?
The memo explains that in a mutual aid effort, you have to have more than one individual responding, and for a Marine deputy, it's very difficult to ask them to pull a potentially unconscious body from the river while operating and navigating the river. So that's where you would need the Grants Pass Fire Rescue members with their Swiftwater training outlined in the memo.
Rick?
Vanessa, does search and rescue as an age, or as a group, do they have that capability?
I don't believe they conduct water rescue unless it's recovery of a deceased body.
Okay. And do the state police have their own division as well?
Not for rescue services.
Okay, thank you.
More law enforcement based.
Brian?
I think I'd be in favor of seeing what the county thinks, maybe bringing it up at the city-county meeting first and just getting the temperature and then going from there.
I'm seeing at least one other head nod on that. And okay, so I think, have they canceled all the meetings for the summer? Is that?
Mayor, I'm not sure. I'd have to clarify when they expect to have another joint meeting.
Okay.
And I can get back to you on that.
Okay, well, maybe we should request a meeting specifically on that topic. Okay. Yeah, just so you all know, we have not had one in the past 2 months because the county has canceled them. Rob?
So we got, I think it was this morning, the memo from Aaron regarding Dollar Mountain and the county turning down our offer or something.
Oh, yeah. I sent an email. Right. This morning. Yeah.
Right. So what are we going to do about that?
So the county.
We need to have an executive session, or what do we need to do?
As I mentioned in the email, at this point, the city has followed the parameters that council has provided with regards to our negotiations. The negotiations have stalled, and there are some other property issues that the county is dealing with that may have a play in that piece of property, and it's very generic in nature. I don't have any of the details that was not provided to me. But the Board of Commissioners did mention that they are interested in continuing negotiations once a couple of other issues have been resolved. And my understanding is, talking with their property manager, that the property was still slated for sale in case negotiations weren't fruitful.
So I'm not sure if this is more appropriate in executive session, but when you say the word negotiations, we made an offer and they say no, or we make an offer and they come back with a counter?
So at this point, we made an offer and they were not interested in the offer. So my correspondence to the Board of Commissioners is that when they are ready to reapproach the negotiation table, then we'll do so, and maybe I'll get some further direction. With further direction, I can come to the council in an executive session and have that discussion. Unless council wants to have a discussion in executive session to modify the parameters that you've provided the city manager.
Brian?
Yeah, I have one other topic for agenda setting, if that's okay.
Okay.
I don't see anywhere that we're going to be talking about the ARPA funds or any of the housing projects or any of those topics anywhere on here. So I would like to at least get it on the back page somewhere, so it's, so it will be coming at some point, because I know we have timelines involved with those.
It will be coming, it's just not listed on here, yes. I guess, are we at a resolution about just waiting on the Dollar Mountain? Would you like a meeting to talk about it more, Valerie?
Well, I'm just going to follow up with what Aaron said, because I did talk to somebody, and I think at this point, we don't need to panic, because I think that the negotiations may not even have anything to do with that piece of property. So I think at this point, we just kind of let it sit for a while, and I don't think it's anything we need to push a button on. I think they're doing some other things with other properties, and there's other things entwined with it. So I'm just going to say that's why I'm not in favor of pushing it forward, because I do think it will resolve itself one way or the other. And then if it does not, at that point, we need to move forward. I would like to just follow up a little bit on the zoning transition overlay. I know that's kind of, in the works. I would like to know at what point, we can have a further discussion about that issue. So I'm going to put that out to Aaron and Augustus and see where we are on that.
So Brad and I have been in discussions with Justin Gerlitz, and we met with Gail Atkins also. We had a short discussion about some possible solutions, both short and long-term, for the zoning transition overlay. And we can probably bring that back sooner than later. It's something that they want to get resolved quickly. Mm-hmm. And so if we brought it back, it would be basically a presentation of the options that council can take to remedy the situation.
Some of the information we're working on right now, and it's a top priority for GIS, is take a look at our transitional overlay, take a look at the permit applications that have come in that are still either being developed or have been applied for that are actually a lower density in the transitional overlay. Take a look at that number, and GIS is going to help us with that. But then also, we're working directly with DLCD to get some comments from them on the transitional overlay and density requirements associated with the urban growth boundary. So once we have those other two pieces, some comments from DLCD and some information from GIS, we will be ready and prepared to bring some information forward to council and give you an update.
Okay, and at that time, will there be the opportunity for the building, for like Justin to be here and some of the builders affected, or what are the plans there?
Well, certainly, but also staff is keeping them in the loop with any progress that we're making. So we're providing information for their building association meetings, their builders meetings, along with any progress that we're having. So they're kept in the loop also. And then ultimately, if you're wanting to hear from them, the best thing to do once we have an idea, and we'll give you additional information, is ultimately you can have a council action item, if there is a council action item associated with moving forward, if there's a change in direction of where you're wanting to go from a policy perspective on the density levels within the urban growth boundary.
Okay. Another thing that I have always felt would be a couple things I'd like to see brought forward to the council, and I do see we have some opening things, is that, one of the things I know that in some of the builders that I've talked to is what they would like to have the council have more information on is financing. When you're asking builders or whatever to do duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and this also deals with the middle housing, which we are still talking about, is the impact that has on a developer or a builder. That a lot of that is not determined by them, but is determined by the world of finance. And I've had a couple people say that might be a good presentation to bring in some finance bank people to talk about how that affects housing, so that we have a better idea of the whole system when we're talking about housing. So I would like to think about having a presentation where some of the bankers are involved in the discussion, so that we can find ways to get housing built as well locally. So So I guess I'm asking the council members if they are interested in having some finance people come in and kind of try to help us understand that, to see if, in what we could do to try to incentivize the buildings of duplexes and triplexes and try to understand how that works. So if there's anybody interested in that. Did Brian have a question?
I think he has a question, and I saw 2 thumbs up. Do you have a question?
Well, if there's 3 in agreement, then I guess I don't have a question. But I know this has been brought up several times before, and there hasn't been appetite for council to hear it because I don't know how it really pertains to what we do. But that's just me.
I think if the angle perhaps is on how to incentivize multi-unit complexes rather than on the steps that they need to go through to do their own financing.
Yes, and that's what I'm really asking for, is that so that we understand, because, you know, in middle housing and that sort of thing, if that's what we're asking them to do, I think a lot of them are on board with it, but what they say is, but you don't understand what's preventing us from doing it. It's not us, it's the banks. And so let's bring the banking people in there and say, okay, how can we help fix that?
So wouldn't that be a more appropriate presentation for like the Home Builders Association where they're talking to them directly? I don't know how that necessarily pertains to council.
I think it's just us understanding the process. I don't think most of us understand the process that is involved in home building or duplex, triplex building in this community. So I just think it's an educational opportunity for us to learn something.
Sure. I'm not getting into the home building industry though, but I do think that would be very valuable for home builders to hear. So I just feel like it'd be more appropriate for the association and for its members to have that discussion than us.
They have had it, and I think they're wanting us to understand it. So that's where I'm coming from, is I'm just saying that I think the home builders want us to understand that it's not necessarily them that is preventing the problem. It's the finances, because they can't go out and necessarily get that unless we bring the bankers and somebody on board to figure out how to incentivize it. So I think it's just a community conversation.
I wonder what role, I guess, we could have the housing specialist play in this, because I think the question really for the council is how our policies and incentive programs can affect the building industry. And so it's like, are we doing the work of the housing specialist?
Well, I can tell you that Amber has been impacted, and she will tell you the story about when she went to buy a house, she could not buy it because there was an ADU on the property, which meant it was a duplex, and so she had to put twice as much money down on the piece of property in order to buy the land. And those are the sorts of things that I think that we need to understand. I think that's not something the average person understands. And so I just have been saying all along that, you know, we need to include bankers in how loans work for an education for everybody to make our community better.
Aaron.
If this gathers traction, I see it as a much bigger issue. It almost is like we need to have members of both parties at the table trying to determine what their difficulties are from a financing realm, and then also the bankers there to help respond and provide opportunity. I think just having bankers present may not show the full picture of where the obstacles might be. So I think you have to have all sides associated with it, having discussions about where are the hurdles that are hard to get over.
Rob.
Yeah, I would probably agree with Aaron. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, while I was pretty satisfied with most of the CET tax that we passed, there was an issue there about 50-year loans and things like that I guess people were saying that needs to be modified because it won't work. So if that's the case, council needs to be aware of that and face reality that there's parts of our CET that we kind of knew the night that we passed it, we're going to need some fine tuning. And I think along those lines, we can probably hear from bankers specifically as to how that could work, because we have apparently one part of that CET that's kind of unworkable, if I remember correctly.
Brian.
So again, I'm not a builder. I'm not a housing expert. So my thought is maybe this is more appropriate for housing committee, who is a panel of experts, and then they could take that information and they could make motions and make recommendations to council who are not experts in that area. So I would just throw that out there.
All right, well, we did have 3 counselors who were interested in doing something with it. So I think we will talk about that some more later. I'd like y'all to be able to have a break before we start our special meeting. So are we done with agenda review for today? All right, is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
A second from Rick. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we will adjourn the workshop and reconvene for our special meeting at 2:30. Thank you.
Maybe.
That's what,
I don't know.
that's what I remember from the night we passed it, that we all kind of knew that it was, that it wasn't right, or that it was unworkable. You know what I mean? The 15